Question from Vikas Pai. He's a nuclear engineer, I think.
Yeah.
Mr. Pai.
The question is, what is wrong in having unqualified teachers in free schools if they are qualified enough in the subject they teach?
This is the row about free schools, which are pretty well the same as academy schools, between two sides of your party, it seems, because you all said it was a good idea to have free schools with unqualified teachers, and David Laws said how brilliant the unqualified teachers were, and suddenly Nick Clegg's saying, oh no, they've all got to be qualified in future. What's wrong with having unqualified teachers if they're good enough at the subjects they teach?
There's quite a lot wrong with it, actually. I agree with the proposals and the policies of this government in terms of the decision to give teachers and head teachers far more freedom and autonomy. That is absolutely right. And it's right to use experts in the classroom to bring them in. I mean, use Lord Sugar to talk about business on a one-off occasion. You know, for your PE lessons, bring in Luis Suarez. Just don't let him teach a course in citizenship. You know, when I worked in higher education for 13 years before I became an MP, and so I don't want to offend everybody I used to work with. But one of the problems we've been moving away from in universities is that we had people with PhDs coming out of their ears who are complete experts, research leaders of the best kind, geniuses, and some of them incapable of communicating that genius to anybody else. And it's no good being a brilliant expert if you can't teach.
And what about if you're a brilliant expert and you can teach?
If you're a brilliant expert and you can teach, then don't undermine the teaching profession by not taking the qualification. I'm quite happy for people to be taken on by a free school or academy and without a qualification, so long as they learn and do it on the job. That is, I mean, what we need to remember is being an expert is a good thing, but being a qualified teacher is also an incredibly good thing. Our teachers are fantastic, they are trained, and we undermine the entire profession and damage our children if we throw away the importance of having a qualified teacher in the classroom.
So what's going on in your... What's going on in your party? Because you signed up to this policy in part of the coalition. Then David Laws comes in as the schools minister and he says the exact opposite of what you've just said. Now you as president say what you've just said. And your leader says something else. I mean, what's going on? You seem to be all over the shop.
I'm not of the view that we are. I mean, David Laws defended the free schools.
You said there are plenty of teachers who may not have formal qualifications, but who do a superb job. The exact opposite of what you just said.
And in a specific instance, and you can say you bring somebody into a class and use them as an expert. Most of us on this panel have probably done that.
You know that's not how it's happened. You know it's not like that.
But my take is, and Nick Clegg's take, and it's been repeated again today, is that you must not undermine the teaching profession. This is not about the ideology about whether it's right or wrong. This is about the experience of our children in our schools.
Yeah, but which Liberal Democrat do you listen to seems to be the problem.
Children in our schools deserve to be taught by people who know what they're doing and are capable of teaching.
Liz Truss. Well, you're the children's minister.
I think we have to look at why we're doing this. We've just had a report from the OECD which says we have some of the lowest rates of literacy and numeracy in our population compared to other countries. We need to make sure that our children get the skills they need at school so they can go and get good jobs. And we're not doing that at the moment. That's why we're raising standards in GCSEs. That's why we're changing the curriculum to make it more effective. And that's why we're enabling academies and free schools to have those freedoms so they can deliver. And all the evidence is they are delivering. Academies are performing better than equivalent maintained schools. Free schools are getting better Ofsted reports than other schools are. And it's because they have those freedoms that schools like independent schools, which of course the Deputy Prime Minister went to, have, that they're able to do that. They're able to bring in the experts, they're able to bring in the great physics teachers, the great engineers and the great artists. And ultimately, Ofsted goes and inspects those schools to make sure teaching is up to scratch. And if it's not, we haul them in pretty quickly. And we've also got the exam results to judge by how well those schools are doing. But we need to do something serious to reform education in this country, because we know that education is vitally important for the economy, but we know that we're not getting enough talented people with the skills they need.
All right.
And one of the things that motivates me so much in this cause is I grew up in Leeds, I went to a comprehensive school. I, like Owen, got into Oxford. But I was one of only a few children to be able to do that. Yes. And we need to make sure that we don't waste our talent. We've got so many talented young people, and we're not giving them the education they deserve. And we do need radical reform.
And unqualified teachers is the way to do it. That was the question.
Well, no, giving head teachers the power to hire the best possible person. Whether they're a great teacher, a great mathematician, is the way to do it.
Thank you. Owen Jones. We'll come back to you. Owen Jones.
Well, firstly, I don't want to be too brutal on the Liberal Democrats. They've done so many U-turns and policy shifts, Tim. I mean, you must be so dizzy, I'm surprised you can even walk, frankly. But,
I've changed nothing.
In terms of, well, I mean, often you have the kind of, you know, rhetoric of Tony Benn and the voting record of George Osborne. But in terms of the actual specifics of the free schools, I think in terms of Finland, for example, they've got one of the best education systems in the whole world, and they train up their teachers to the best possible degree. There's a difference between knowing how to teach and being an expert in your particular field. What free schools are doing, in my view, and I'm a person like yourself, proudly comprehensively educated, my primary school's in the bottom 5% by results. I was the only boy to go to university. As far as I know, more ended up in prison. That wasn't because I was brighter, it's because I had odds stacked in my favour from day one. If you look at the gap in vocabulary at the age of 5, between an affluent and a poor child, it's 18 months. If you look at the impact of diet, poor kids turning up hungry, if you look at the impact of housing and the stresses that has on education, or poor health, these are the issues that are really driving divisions in our educational system, not the structure of schools. And free schools, frankly, on average, and we've seen in 2011, they're less likely to take in kids from free school meals. They're sucking resources from other schools. Yes, they are. And they're going in areas often where there's a surplus of places. Let's stop scapegoating comprehensive education for all the ills of society. Let's wage war on the causes of education inequality, not the symptoms. And let's build an educational system we can all be proud of.
I want to go back to the question of Vikas Pai, who's got his hand up there. Mr. Pai.
Well, my thinking is, if you are passionate about science, passionate about mathematics, and you have a degree in mathematics and science to back it up, you can teach.
You can. Okay. Peter Hitchens.
I don't know what the evidence is that our current system of teacher training is particularly successful in training teachers. As far as I know, it was introduced in the days of Harold Wilson. And before then, we had rather effective state schools called grammar schools, which have been subsequently abolished in an act of extraordinary spite. I think it's also true that the independent schools do not have the requirement that the most state schools have to employ teachers who've gone through the ordinary teacher training system.
But the different. They're privileged people from privileged, educated backgrounds. We don't start from the same place in life, Peter.
I'll carry on if I might. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the fact that someone has a qualification doesn't necessarily make them a good teacher any more than anything else does. What makes them a good teacher is that ability to teach, the desire to communicate, which some people have, some people don't, and that has to be sorted out actually in practice, as all of us found at school, with the teachers who inspired us and the teachers who didn't. What you really need to worry about, most of all, is making sure that those children who at the moment are denied access to good education because their parents aren't rich, have access to good education, and I think a lot of that good education will be provided by teachers who don't have formal teacher training qualifications. Free schools are a stunt and a gimmick, as are academies. There's no proof that academies are any better than comprehensives. Free schools will never, ever change the lives of most people. What all the parties need to do is to admit that they made a catastrophic mistake in 1965 by abolishing selection by ability and bring it back. Those people who sit on this panel and say they went to comprehensive schools, I think will for the most part turn out not to have gone to normal comprehensive schools, but to the kind of comprehensive schools that only some people can go to. How is it that they go to them? Generally because their parents lived in areas that other people couldn't afford to live in. That is selection by money. That is selection by money. And it is very, very unfair, and it's quite extraordinary that parties which claim to be in favour of improving the situation of the poor constantly refuse to reintroduce a system which selects by ability and which is therefore fair.
Peter, we have it in Kent, and poorer kids are less likely to do well in Kent, where selection is still in place.
I think you're all if you want to
distorted because it's so.
Wait a minute. I want to bring Caroline Flint in, because she hasn't yet spoken on this. But just before we do, your comprehensive school in an prosperous middle-class area?
No,
or
I grew
working-class
up in Kale Green in Stockport. My primary school was in the bottom 5%. My secondary school was above the national average. My sixth form was below the national average. I went to Ridge Daniel sixth
All right,
form.
enough.
I went to a whole tour of comprehensive schools.
The comprehensive I went to was an average comprehensive in Leeds.
Well, in round, eh?
I checked once with a mate of mine, and out of the people of my year, 5 went to prison, 4 went to university.
All right, well, that was a good school then, that one going.
We were a bad year. My sisters was quite good.
The old boys reunions, say. Caroline Flint, you go to...
I went to a comprehensive school in Twickenham in London. My children all went to comprehensive school in Doncaster.
Twickenham is a middle-class area, of course.
Yeah, it is a more middle-class area, I suppose,
yes.
but, you know, I'm not from a middle-class family. It was a former grammar school, and what I would say is, whenever we have these conversations about how good the grammars were, only a few young people got the benefit. Secondary Modern wrote off generations of young people and did nothing for them.
Let's come to the...
All
right, everybody.
So can I come to the free schools?
Come to the free schools.
There are 174 free schools. There are over 21,000 state schools, and the amount of time we're spending on free schools seems completely a ridiculous amount of time for the government to do. And on the issue of unqualified teachers, look, I know from my own children's education, we had sports people, we had other people come in who did master classes, who worked alongside the teachers. And we've always had that provision in the state school system to utilise that skill. But I believe strongly that actually we should support qualifications for teachers. And if that means we bring people in from industry or from the army or elsewhere, they can come in, but they should qualify. And let's listen to the examples of what's happened recently. The Al Medina School in Derby had unqualified teachers. Kids with special needs were not being attended to. In Pimlico, a 27-year-old was put in charge of that school with no qualification for teaching, no management experience, and walked. And this is what is going on with this free school policy. And I'm afraid to say, Tim, that when Labour put forward some restrictions on the legislation around the use of unqualified teachers, I don't know what you did, but Nick Clegg didn't support Labour on that. And now, once again, we've seen, when the going gets tough, he walks and tries to cover himself in glory.
Thank you. I'm going to take just a couple more points. The woman in yellow there.
As a teacher myself, I'm absolutely disgusted that it's acceptable for people not to be trained. It is a profession. Yeah. You know, other professions aren't treated like that.
Let's go on. Other professions, you were saying?
Other professions are treated with a lot more respect than teachers, and it's, you know, it seems to be have a go at teachers all the time.
Exactly.
Anyone can teach. That's what people think.
And you think...
It's a very, very difficult job.
You can't teach until you've been taught
You
how
need
to
to be
teach.
trained how to teach.
All right.
I agree.
And you waving your hand there rather aggressively.
I just want to say I have
Yes.
a PhD and I'm incredibly passionate about my subject, but I still think that I should be qualified, and it brings the whole reputation of the job into question if we can't make sure that people have minimum qualifications.
What's your PhD in?
In classics, and I'm really passionate. People should study Greek and Latin.
And do you teach it?
Yeah, I do, and I go into schools, and I still don't think that I'm so brilliant that I can then just teach. I go into schools and I volunteer, but I would still do a PGCE if I actually became a teacher.
All right.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Okay.